Hi everybody, I just wanted to share a little story with you. I'm sitting here in my treehouse. This is my new friend, Molly. Look, Molly, say hi to the camera. And Molly Microsoft. Microsoft. So anyway, I was going to leave a comment on Bob Seger Turned the Page, and it turned out to be more of a story than a comment, so I'm going to make this video. So, in 1977, when I was 13, I ran away from home. I had a paper bag full of clothes, 9 cents, and a steady bottle of beer. So this was winter in Illinois, and it was pretty late, and I went down to the railroad tracks, and I sat there for about an hour and drank that beer, and waited for a train, which never came. So after an hour or so, I walked up to the highway and stuck up my thumb. Now, the first ride I got was an older kid. I think it was a Charger, a souped-up Charger he was driving. It was a really nice car. And he was heading south for about 40 miles. He gave me a ride. And then along the way, he gave me a couple beers. And when we got to it was a really tiny town. And when we got there, he dropped me off at the south end of town and went on his way. So anyway, I'm wearing Sunday school type shoes and not really a heavy enough jacket. It was about 5 degrees out. And there wasn't a soul around, no traffic, no cars, no people, nothing. I was pretty small back then. I had a pretty good buzz on, and I started walking out of town into the dark, staggering down the road. And I went about a mile, and I passed out in the ditch. I'm not sure exactly what woke me up. I didn't freeze to death right there, but I woke up cold. I got up and I started kept walking down the road. I got about a mile further down the road, and I came across a farmhouse and a big barn. So I went to the big barn, and went inside. My paper bag had pretty much disintegrated, and I found a burlap sack, and I used that, put all my stuff in, and I was freezing. Wandering around, I was in like a shop. It was like a shop. I was wandering around and I felt on the wall a thermostat. And I turned it up and poof, it was a heater about 15 feet up in the air, a big green one that was blowing hot air down. And I was like, oh, thank God. It was like a workbench or maybe it was a picnic table. Anyway, I sat down at that and it was blowing right on me, and in 2 seconds I was out cold. It was really early, probably about 5 or 6 in the morning. A big sliding door over here opened and closed, and the farmer came in. I could see the light, but I couldn't wake up, and he wandered around me. He went around me several times. He was in there for about a half an hour, and somehow didn't notice me right there in the middle of the room. He must have thought he left the heater on because it had to have been 90 degrees in there, because I turned that thing up full blast. I couldn't see what I was doing. So anyway, after about a half hour or so, he left, opened the door, shut it again, and then within about a minute, the door opened really fast. And he came back and was like, oh, hey, what are you doing in here? And I guess he left and went, wait a minute, was there a kid sitting in there? So anyway, he wakes me up, and I was like, oh, I was freezing to death when I came in here last night. And he seemed kind of mad, but I think he was more bewildered than anything. He continued questioning me as he rifled through the potato sack. He wanted to make sure I hadn't stolen anything from him. And I kind of thought that was kind of funny at the time, and ironic, really. Because the sack was his. Everything in it was mine. I didn't take anything from him. So he was kept asking me why I ended up there. So I told him that, I said, well, I'm going to visit my sister, and I pointed south, and I said, she lives in the next town down here, and he said the name of the town, and I said, yeah, that's it, because I had no idea where I was. And so he took me back into town, the town that I'd walked out of, and he got me a ride on a school bus, an empty school bus, to the next town. So we went down there, and about a mile from the town, it turns left and goes to the town. Well, I was supposed to go to the right, but just me and the bus driver, so I figured, well, I'll just have to hoof it back this way. And so when we got to the town, I waited until she got a couple. She was saying, well, what street is it? And I was like, oh, I can't remember. I'll know it when I see it. And then just a couple streets in, I said, oh, that's it. After we passed it, so that she wouldn't drive up to the door and wait for me to, somebody to answer. And go, who are you? So she almost turned the bus around. I was like, no, that's all right. I think you for the ride. And, I got out, and she was like, oh, okay. She watched me for a minute, and then she took off. And I just started walking down there towards the houses and waited until she was out of sight. And then I came back and headed back to the junction. Now, that's when my day turned totally bizarre. I don't buy into much of that nonsense, crazy stuff, but I think not dying in that ditch somehow set that next day in motion. So here it is. Now, if somebody told me the story, I probably wouldn't believe it. I would say, oh yeah, sure, embellishing or whatever. But I'm telling you the exact truth on what happened. Now, I had recently started smoking, and I was walking back towards that junction, and on either side of me, it's just nothing but empty cornfields with a little snow on them, barren. There's just nothing out there in wintertime. And I thought to myself, I either thought to myself, or maybe said it under my breath, or maybe said it out loud. I can't remember. We're talking a long time ago. I said, God, I wish I had a cigarette. And literally seconds after I said that, I looked to the right, and there was 3 packs of Winstons in the ditch, unopened. It stood out like crazy, because everything's brown and yucky and white. So, I didn't, it was years later before I realized how improbable that moment truly was. I can't recall if I had a lighter or some matches. I think I had some matches, so that was lucky. So anyway, I got to the junction, just in time to stick my thumb out. There was a Hicks gas and propane truck just coming up there. So I just got across, so, he knows I'm going that way. And he stopped. There was an older man driving, and he gave me a lift, and this was probably 10 minutes after I found the cigarettes, so I had time to smoke one. And so anyway, he was a really nice guy, and we were driving along, and he said he delivers propane to all his neighbors and stuff, and it sounded like a pretty cool job, and just total nice guy, and we talked the whole way, and I think we went about 30 miles, half hour, 45 minutes maybe. And I don't know if you're familiar with Hicks, but it's a pretty big company. They got lots of propane, and they have restaurants, and a lot of stuff. It's a pretty big corporation. Midwest, and I think in the East too. So anyway, he pulls up at a Hicks restaurant, and he says, well, hey, are you hungry? And I was like, absolutely. So that was pretty nice. He's going to buy me some breakfast, because I only have 9 cents. It's not like I'm buying much for myself. And I was really confused when we walked in, because there was like a whole bunch of employees like near the door, and they all had big smiles on their face, and just really odd for walking into a restaurant. And I thought they were going to sing Happy Birthday, or like curtsying and bowing almost. I was like, what the hell? And he was behind me at the time. I'd come in first. And just the biggest smiles, too. And I wasn't confused for long, though, because the waitress closest to us turned and said, "Good morning, Mr. Hicks." And I was blown away. This is the guy that owns the entire corporation. And he's out driving a truck out in the middle of nowhere in Illinois and delivering to his neighbors. So we were eating breakfast. He was telling me that, he was retired, but, got bored, so he just took the local route and was propane to his friends and his neighbors. So that was pretty amazing in itself. Just caught him at the junction, too. Another minute later, and he'd already turned and was gone. I think we got along so well because I didn't know who he was. He seemed a little tired of the king treatment that he was getting. So, he just talked to somebody normal. I wasn't kissing his butt. He had to get back to work, but he told me to stay and eat all that I wanted. And then he instructed the waitress to give me a nice to-go bag. After he left, their attitudes never wavered. They were just as nice to me as treated me like the king's son, And she gave me a bag when I left. I can't imagine how much it weighed. It was pretty much one of everything on the breakfast menu. So it weighed as much as all my stuff that I had. So at least I had some food there. He's sincerely one of the nicest men I've met in my entire life. I can't remember pretty much anything that happened that day. We're talking 1977. But I remember in the evening around about 5 p.m., maybe a little earlier, it got dark pretty early. This guy picked me up in a pickup truck. He was the second nicest guy I've ever met, I think. And we were driving along, and I remember where we were because it was near the Vandalia prison. They have the big signs that say, "Don't pick up hitchhikers." So I remember that. And he lived in that area where them signs were and everything. And he invited me to his home for dinner. He said that his wife was cooking frog legs, of all things, and which are delicious. And I thought, well, he probably isn't a psycho killer. I don't think a psycho killer would come up with a story like that, It's pretty specific. So on that, I said, okay, why not? So now I was getting a little nervous because, I said, one problem was, how am I going to get a ride? If he puts me back on that road, it says don't pick up hitchhikers because he might be a prison escapee. So he said, don't worry, he would take me down to, it's in Vandalia, I believe. And there's an interstate, I believe it's 70 that runs to St. Louis, and he's going to drop me off at the interstate. And I was like, okay, well, all right. And so he turns off the road, somewhere near the prison. I think I found it on the map. But he went a ways. We went probably at least 3 to 5 miles off the main road. And I was thinking, well, gosh, I better pay attention to where he's turning in case, things don't work out, or, maybe his wife's all mad and, and I'll be walking back to the highway. So I better pay attention to where I'm at so that I'll be able to get back there. Well, it turns out that by paying attention, and I was able to find it on Google Maps 40 years later. I'm pretty sure I found the right place. So anyway, I go to his house, and he's got a wonderful family. His wife's awesome. His house is warm, comfortable. It's just awesome. He has a son about 9 and a daughter my age. And she is, how do I say it, angelic. A vision of loveliness. I'm not sure there's words that truly would describe her. Maybe utter perfection. Truly a beautiful, happy person, inside and out, smart, well-rounded, with the most heart-melting smile. Ironically, we were seated across from each other at like the head of the table. So I kept bouncing between farmer's beautiful daughter jokes and looking across at my queen. It seemed to me like she was flirting with me the whole dinner. She kept smiling and looking at me and blinking her eyes, and it kind of made me uncomfortable, but I think that she was enjoying making me sweat a little. So anyway, after dinner, we all moved to the living room, and the man started a conversation with me that I felt he repeated on more than one occasion. And I must say he laid it out to perfection. He couldn't have done a better job of it, as far as not scaring somebody off or freaking them out or, something like that. It was obvious to him that I must be running from something or that things were going well for me at this particular time, yet he never asked any questions about my situation. Grilled me for info or even mentioned being a runaway, which I'm pretty sure they knew, And the whole family sat around, nodding in agreement with some of the things he said and looking a bit empathetic. Basically, he was saying I could join their family if they really wanted me to, and that working out the details, I guess legal-wise, I would suspect, wouldn't be a problem. It'd be like gradual over time. He just kind of just brushed on things like that, but kept it light. Trying not to scare me off. Really, he should be a caseworker for sure. Really amazing people. So it's just a fitting end to a most bizarre day. That I almost died the day before, or certainly could have. I don't know how I could have woke up in 5-degree weather. I know the alcohol probably kept me warmer, but still, I'm not sure what would wake me up. I guess I wasn't done. So I've always been a bit of a loner, and since back then I'm an adventurer. I travel a lot and stuff. So my response to something like that would kind of be an automatic no, but this was so heartfelt that I seriously considered it. The van went out, I think he was unloading his truck or something like that, or, making a reason to vacate, and the rest of the family went to the kitchen and they were cleaning up from dinner, and he just told me, he just hang out here, and he'll go to get you back to the road, and you can think about it. So they left me there for about a half an hour to an hour, and I had plenty of time to think about it. The one tipping point that made me decide to keep going was really the daughter. I mean, I'd only known her for about an hour or so, but I was really head over heels. Being my new sister could only end in disaster. I mean, she was just amazing. I wish I'd asked a few more questions, though, because I think it's quite possible that those kids were also runaways that they had taken in, or something similar to that. Because there really wasn't a family resemblance, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but just the way that the daughter acted on a couple occasions there. I mean, when I look back at it now, I think it's quite possible. And the satellite pictures that I'm thinking is the house, if I remember the roads he took, has a basketball court and a baseball table, which would make sense if you were taking in kids and trying to straighten them out. So anyway, I graciously declined. The entire family drove me to the freeway that night. I climbed out into the darkness, and you could hear the whooshing of the semis. The road was curved and it was up above. and I grabbed my bag. I got out of the back seat. I grabbed my bag, put it over my shoulder. Before I could close the door, the daughter grabbed my hand very, very tightly and looked up at me and said, "Please don't go." And there was enough light there that I could see her face, and so beautiful and so sad. I can't believe I didn't get back in that car. Seriously. And to this day, I wonder what my life would have been like had I stayed there. Different, I'm sure. But, I've always thought back to that time, that girl, and this brings me back to Bob Seger. So over the next 4 to 5 years, well, like 15 years, but in the next 4 to 5 years, I hitchhiked over 70,000 miles around the United States. I can't begin to cover the emotions that I feel from Turn the Page. It fits my situation as well as someone on stage. The girl I knew the night before, out there in the spotlight, standing on the side of the freeway with your thumb out and a smile on your face and watching the headlights coming at you. It's the same thing. Walking to a restaurant strung out from the road, certainly. And the woman or man had long blonde hair, people talking behind your back. Now, I didn't lie awake in bed at night with the echoes from the amplifiers ringing in my head. I laid in my mummy bag under an overpass and smoked my last cigarette with the sound of the semis in my ear. So, a little different, but... And then I used to listen to Bob Seger, too, on my AM/FM 8-track Sears Red. 2 speakers came apart, really cool. But yeah, that was one of the 8-tracks that I had back then. Sometimes, like when I'm staying in a motel in, like, say, Los Angeles, there's freeways everywhere there. I can stand outside, close my eyes, and listen to the traffic on the freeway, and it all comes back to me. I'm standing on the side of the freeway, waiting for that semi that's 5 miles away, and you can hear it coming. And by the way, it's the same sound as the ocean. I'm not sure why that is, but yeah, so that's my little story. Bob Seger, Turn the Page. So, heck, I think when I'm done here, I'll play it one more time. Okay, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed my story. If I get some good comments on it, maybe I'll tell some more, because I've got some crazy ones. One's called 911. I was 3 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico in a hammock with no land. So that was kind of fun. So anyway, that's it. Molly and me are going to go say goodbye. Say goodbye, Molly. Bye. Did you get that camera?